In Paris, on the Île de la Cité, the historical center of the French capital, stands one of the masterpieces of Gothic art, the Cathedral of Notre-Dame de Paris. In the 12th century, Maurice de Sully, then the Bishop of Paris, began the construction of this edifice on the site of two former places of worship, Notre-Dame and Saint-Étienne, St. Stephen. At this time, as was the case throughout Western Europe, the cities in France experienced a rapid rise in population due to major economic development. Specialists estimate that, in the 13th century, the population of Paris went from 25,000 to 50,000 in just a few years, making it the biggest city in Europe, excluding cities in Italy. The old cathedrals quickly became too small to welcome the increasingly large number of churchgoers. With the decision to build Notre-Dame de Paris confirmed, the construction began under the reign of Louis VII and lasted nearly 200 years, from 1163 to 1345. 127 meters long and 69 meters high, the cathedral can hold 9,000 people, including 1,500 in the tribunes.
The
cathedral we see here was built at the end of the 12th century and in the first half of the 13th century. In fact, it was during a time when, in the northern kingdom of France, there was a boom in the construction of large cathedrals. If we were to identify one starting date, and with so many developments, there's no one true starting point, it would be in the 1140s. In 1140, Abbot Suger decided to modify the center of his ministry in Saint-Denis, using new systems of building vaults.
Des nouvelles manières de voûter que l'on a à l'époque, ce qui va amener le passage.
These new techniques would carry architecture from what we call Roman art to ogival art, later to be known as Gothic art.
Il s'agit cette fois-ci de canaliser les poussées par l'intermédiaire de...
Pressure was directed upward on very specific points, using rib-shaped buttresses, allowing for more space within the cathedral and freeing it from the need for load-bearing walls. As a result, stone walls were replaced by large glass walls, upon which the art of stained glass was developed, which came to add a spiritual feeling to the buildings.
De donner son sens spirituel à ce bâtiment.
For 800 years now, Notre-Dame de Paris has remained a principal pilgrimage site for Catholics. The cathedral is a particularly lively church. 5 services are performed every day of the week, with 7 on Sunday. In all, over 2,000 celebrations a year occur under its ribbed arches. Its simplicity is absolutely surprising. You can see that it was constructed using very simple geometric lines. There are horizontals, verticals, squares, and circles. You can see these are tremendously simple geometric shapes. Of course, the organization of these geometric shapes offers us a symbolic reading of the cathedral. As soon as you see it, you are struck by its vertical height, obtained thanks to its 4 large buttresses, which continue on in the towers of the facade. This vertical line lifts your gaze, letting you know that this is far more than any church. It's a cathedral. It was constructed for God. But at the same time, you see that in this cathedral, the verticals are broken by large horizontals. There is the double horizontal in the Gallery of Kings and the double horizontal of the Great Colonnade. The horizontals have a reverse effect and bring us back to the parvis. Today, just as in history, the parvis is where men and women come and go. It is a meeting place, a place of humanity. This is to say that the cathedral was also built for man, for humankind. The cathedral is the meeting place of God and man. At the center of the cathedral is the rose window. The circle is a shape that has no beginning and no end, as is the case of God. It is a perfect geometrical shape that symbolizes otherworldliness, that which was not created. The rose is within a square. The square is the shape of our world. The 4 points of the compass, the 4 elements, the created world. Here, perfection lies within imperfection. Supreme being and followers lie within creation. Somehow, in the stones of the cathedral, there is a message of embodiment. God made man and entered this world. At Notre-Dame de Paris, today is a day of the ordination of priests. This is the act by which the bishop administers the sacrament of the priesthood to a man, who then becomes the apostle of Jesus Christ. He can thus spread the word of the Lord.
Arnaud, promets-tu de vivre en communion avec moi et mes successeurs dans le respect et l'obéissance? Je le promets. Que Dieu lui-même achève en toi ce qu'il a commencé.
A major site of the Christian faith, the cathedral is, of course, also a highly renowned tourist site for its architectural beauty. From top to bottom, there is the facade with 3 entrance portals, the Gallery of Kings, and above that, the rose window. A multitude of finely sculpted and stone characters magnificently decorate each edge of the openings. It is true stone lacework that, at the time, was entirely painted, as witnessed one 15th century foreign visitor. This is what he wrote. Rather late the next day, we visited the great church. It is spacious, beautiful, and so admirable that it is impossible for man's language to describe it. It has 3 large doors facing west. The 2 panels of the middle door show Christ standing. It is the Last Judgment. Above this door is Christ presiding over the Last Judgment. He's on a golden throne, and all is decorated in plated gold. A little further. Before Christ are the holy apostles, the prophets, the patriarchal saints, and all the saints, painted in various colors and decorated with gold. Still higher, at the level of the rose window, is the Virgin Mary, Mother of God, decorated with gold and painted various colors. I'll stop the citation here because he also speaks of St. Anne's door and of the door of the coronation of the Virgin, also covered in gold and painted. When we did the works, we found traces of gold. Indeed, at certain hours of the day, we see traces of gold in the halo that encircles Christ's head at the central portal. Many things were found, but not enough to fully restore it to as it had been in the Middle Ages. Still, we can see that the colors are quite simple: vibrant reds, vermilions, blue, green, and in general, the colors are contrasted. For example, looking at the clothes, when a tunic is blue, the dress will be red. The sculpture on the side, though, will be red, with a blue dress, and so on. The colors are contrasted to make for the best viewing. For the Gallery of Kings, the kings are in a trilobe that was painted on the interior in red vermilion, an incredibly violent red. The facade, supported from the outside by 4 buttresses to reinforce the towers, has 3 portals. The one on the left is dedicated to the Virgin Mary. It is a bit older than the others and dates from the 1210s. The statue of the Virgin and Child is situated at the trumeau, the central pillar of the portal. The tympanum has arches and 2 lintels that are heavily sculpted with images of prophets, kings, angels, and patriarchs. The lower lintel reveals the Ark of the Covenant, surrounded by the kings of Israel and the prophets. The upper lintel shows the death of the Virgin in the presence of Christ. At the top of the tympanum, we see the coronation of the Virgin Mary. She is seated to the right of Christ, with an angel above placing a golden crown on the Virgin Mary's head. To the right is a portal dedicated to the life of St. Anne, the mother of the Virgin Mary. It comes from the church that had been on this site before the current-day cathedral. The trumeau shows a tall statue of Saint Marcel, the Bishop of Paris at the time. The 8 statues of the door jamb represent King Solomon, Saint Peter, and Saint Paul, among others. Above the 2 lintels, the tympanum shows the Virgin in Majesty, holding the baby Jesus in her arms. Around this are 2 characters that could be the Bishop Maurice de Sully, the founder of Notre-Dame, and Louis VII, the King of France at the time. The main door is dedicated to the Last Judgment. It is the main portal of the cathedral. Its imagery is striking. The remarkable sculpture of the tympanum dates from 1210. It shows the scenes of the Last Judgment, when, according to Christian tradition, the dead are resurrected and judged by Christ. On the lower lintel, we can see the dead leaving their tombs. Above is the Archangel Saint Michael, using a scale to weigh sins and virtues. 2 demons are trying to tilt the scales in their favor, and the chained damned are brought to hell, pushed by other demons. The expressions on the faces of the damned are crafted with a rare talent. On the upper tympanum, Christ presides over this divine court and is depicted with a half-bare torso to show his wounds. The arches on the side of the saved show the patriarchs of the Catholic Church. It is a concrete presentation of Christian imagery from the Middle Ages that strongly influenced the people of the time. A very important element in this western facade are the doors and the metal hinges. It is all the more interesting that, for the coronation of the Virgin at the Saint Anne portal, where we now are, we can see the originals from the mid-13th century. The artist was named Bisconnet. The work is a masterpiece of ironsmithing. You see the complexity of all these scrolls and leaves with the hinges. The large horizontal lines of iron hold the hinges that are embedded in the stone, allowing for the opening of the panels. You can see how very complex it all is. Actually, there are little pieces of 20 to 30 centimeters, and the ends have a flattened tab that can be soldered together with the piece on the side. So they solder the small engraved elements one after another. A motif would be placed over each soldering to hide the work. You see that we have a garland, a leaf, etc., in order to hide the soldering, so that it would never be seen. During the French Revolution of 1789, the whole of the statuary and the altars were either destroyed or looted. The Catholic religion was even forbidden in Paris, and the cathedral is transformed into a warehouse. In the 19th century, the architect Eugène Viollet-le-Duc began a restoration of Notre-Dame in the spirit of the era, basing itself almost perfectly with the spirit of the Middle Ages.
Alors, comment Viollet-le-Duc a-t-il été
How did Viollet-le-Duc become interested in the cathedral? Quite simply, it was because the then French government under King Louis-Philippe put him in charge of the reconstruction of Notre-Dame's new sacristy. This new sacristy, which we know today, would reconstruct itself in the neo-Gothic style, a style adapted from that of the 13th century. This construction is a work in itself, an absolute recreation by Viollet-le-Duc. And from the sacristy, he was trusted with the restoration of the entire cathedral.
Toutes les grandes statues que voyez aujourd'hui, à l'exception des tympans,
all of the tall statues that you see today, with the exception of the portal's tympanums, are from the 19th century.
Les grandes statues de Notre-Dame sont du 19e siècle. Viollet-le-Duc également.
Viollet-le-Duc also added many details to the decoration. He had all of the gargoyles that we see today redone.
Des gargouilles que l'on voit aujourd'hui.
In addition to the gargoyles which evacuated the rainwater flowing from the roofs, the chimeras add to the phantasmagorical aspect of the cathedral. The demon-like and often grotesque statues are purely decorative. These elements that did not exist in the Middle Ages are the additions designed and incorporated by Eugène Viollet-le-Duc himself, and were intended to recreate the fantastical atmosphere for which the Middle Ages are known. This is where we see the daring risk that the architect took, a risk that resulted in undeniable success.
Eh bien évidemment, on ne serait pas complet si on
Of course, it would be impossible to make this visit without mentioning Viollet-le-Duc's masterpiece, the Flèche, or the Arrow, which is a spire. In the medieval period, there was a little spire situated at the transept crossing. This spire disappeared during the French Revolution, and Viollet-le-Duc decided to recreate another, the spire we see today. It was made by the master Bellu, who constructed other spires in many of France's cathedrals.
Et pour bien montrer que c'est son chef-d'œuvre, à la base de cette flèche seront
To show off his
représentés
masterpiece,
les
at the
12
base of his
apôtres,
arrow, he placed the 12 apostles
tous
looking toward the
regardant
horizon.
vers, l'horizon. Un
Only
seul,
one, Saint Thomas, has his head turned
a la
upward
tête
toward the
tournée
rooster.
vers le sommet, le
This
coq
depiction of
de,
Saint Thomas
cette
has
flèche,
undeniably
et
the
Saint
same
Thomas
features as
est
those of Eugène
représenté
Viollet-le-Duc,
sous les traits d'Eugène Viollet-le-Duc,
and he is
parce
carrying a
que
builder's
c'est
ruler, or a
la
square,
règle,
as he is the
de
patron saint of
l'architecte.
architects.
Saint Thomas était le patron de l'architecte, et sur
On
cette
this
règle,
builder's
il y a
ruler is
marqué
written the name
le
Eugène
nom
Emmanuel
de
Viollet-le-Duc.
Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc.
Today, what most
Aujourd'hui,
symbolizes
ce
the
qui
cathedral
symbolise
is,
la
of course, its
cathédrale, c'est certes
facade,
sa
but it is
façade,
also the
comme un
spire of
signe,
Notre-Dame.
un repère
It is
au
a point
cœur
of
de la
reference in
ville.
the heart of the
Eh
city,
bien, vous
and it
avez
is a
cette
spire
flèche,
dating from the
voilà,
19th
qui est pourtant
century.
une flèche du 19e siècle.
The side facade that faces the Seine River also has a magnificent rose window, one of Europe's largest.
C'est le portail qui était
This
en
portal
liaison
was
directe
directly
avec
connected
l'évêché,
to the
donc
bishop's
l'évêque
palace,
passait par
as it is through here that the bishop
au-dessus.
passed.
Donc, vous avez cette,
Above,
nouvelle
you have the new
brouette
feet.
qui est une architecture d'un pan
The stone
de-
facade is showered with
pierre,
splendid stained glass
qui est
windows,
complètement percée,
of which a part was
avec
constructed
des
from the
vitraux
former windows.
splendides, une partie des vitraux anciens.
Here we have an opening of over 13 meters in diameter. But let's continue our tour of the building.
Donc là, on est à une place très privilégiée.
This is
qui
a
est
special
l'abside.
place, the
On
apse.
se rend bien compte de la
It is
structure
here
de
that
la
we can
cathédrale.
truly understand the structure of the
Alors, les
cathedral.
arcs-boutants que l'on voit à l'heure
The flying
actuelle,
buttresses
on
that
peut
we
les
see
dater,
today date not
ils
from the
datent
construction of the
non
choir,
pas du tout de la construction du
but from a
chœur,
few
mais
years
quelques
later,
années plus
in the
tard, ils
first
datent
quarter
du
of the
premier
13th
quart
century.
du XIIIe siècle. À l'époque, vous savez que la cathédrale
At the
est
time,
mal
the
éclairée
cathedral is poorly
intérieurement.
lit
On a
inside.
agrandi les fenêtres,
To compensate
et en
for
faisant
this,
ces travaux,
the windows were
on a
enlarged, and in doing this
reconstruit
work,
ces arcs-boutants
the flying
que vous voyez à
buttresses
l'heure
that you see
actuelle,
here were built.
et qui sont d'une conception
They are stunning
architecturale,
architectural
d'une
elements in
structure tout à fait
conception and
étonnante.
structure.
Vous voyez, ils ont
They have just
une
one
seule
flight
volée
in which to spread the
pour
force
reporter
upon the
sur
exterior
les
supports.
contreforts extérieurs et la portée de l'ordre de 15
They
mètres.
reach about 15
Et
meters.
vous voyez la
You
coupe
see in this cross-section
avec ce
with a
voûtement de
33-meter
33
high
mètres de
arch.
hauteur, et vous voyez l'arc d'une seule
You can
volée
also
qui
see
va
the arc,
contre
one sole flight,
ces butons,
that
contre ces
pushes up
contreforts
against the
très
stays,
importants.
against the
Mais
very large buttresses.
regardez la
But look at the
chose, la
technique, the
qualité,
quality.
la technique, c'est qu'en réalité,
In
vous
fact,
avez
there's only one
un seul
arch.
arc. C'est-à-dire qu'au niveau de
In other
contre-butant,
words,
de
in terms of support
solidité,
and
c'est
solidity,
tout à fait
it is
extraordinaire.
absolutely
Ça n'existe pas
extraordinary.
sur les autres
No other cathedral has this.
Alors, le problème est,
In addition,
en plus,
you
vous
see the
voyez
apse
le
with its
chevet,
radiating arcs.
vous voyez le chevet, ces arcs
As we are on a
rayonnants,
rounded
puisqu'on est une
part, the
partie
pyramid
tournante,
shape
vous
and
voyez,
its
on a un
architecture
effet
are
pyramidal,
exceptional.
architectural, tout à fait exceptionnel. Donc ça, c'est
This is one of the cathedral's greatest attributes, with the western facade, and so much else.
Un des éléments majeurs de la cathédrale.
It is here around the choir that we can fully appreciate the lightness of this edifice. We're on the first step of the terrace, on the same level as the tribune's floor. We can see the small flying buttresses which hold up the vaults of the tribune. You see that nothing is wasted. At the key, you have the unique cupola brick, and above, the aqueduct. There's nothing extra. It is truly sparse. I would dare say that only a computer could come up with such purity. It has the absolute minimum needed to maintain its structure, and look, it has been here since the 13th century. Both inside and outside, majestic lightness reigns. Notre-Dame de Paris, as well as most French cathedrals, is based on a Latin cross plan. The nave has 10 rows and the choir has 5. The axis is slightly deviated toward the left in relation to the nave's axis, symbolizing the traditional portrayal of Christ on the cross, with his head tilted left. The apse is semicircular with 5 sides. There are 3 levels. The first is made up of large arcades. The second corresponds to the open-worked tribune, and the third level has the tall windows. The choir was slightly enlarged and a new bronze altar placed in the new space, clearly visible, situated near the cathedral center. The other side of the facade has a tribune for the organ, just in front of the rose window. Around 1250, the architect Jean Dechelle began an extension of the transepts with the superb side rose windows above them. The interior of Notre-Dame de Paris is a truly mystical delight. Here we are in a special place of the cathedral. We have the rose window here in front of our eyes, at the far end of the northern transept. Behind us, there is a rose window of the southern transept. There is still another, third large rose window in the Notre-Dame de Paris, but it is partially hidden by the great organ, opening onto the eastern part. This rose window that we see here is absolutely extraordinary. It was constructed between 1250 and 1270, during the reign of King Saint Louis. It is particularly remarkable for the delicacy of its colors, for its lightness, and for the vibration which emanates from this ensemble when we reflect on it. This rose window is 13 meters in diameter and meets with vertical windows that are about 6 meters, making between 18 and 19 meters of glass. Truly exceptional. In 1756, the canons deciding that the edifice was too somber had the windows from the Middle Ages destroyed. Fortunately, they left the rose windows intact and only removed the vertical windows. The cathedral's stained glass windows have been subjected to destruction and numerous restorations over the centuries. The main colors used in their fabrication in the Middle Ages were cobalt for the blue, copper for the red and green, manganese for the purple, and antimony for the yellow. Once the painting on the glass dried, it was fired at over 600 degrees. The technique used for the highly transparent blues has been lost over time. Here you see many old and valuable stained glass windows. For example, this medallion. It is an angel holding an incense holder. It is authentic, with the exception of the occasional touch-ups of certain elements. For example, the face is ancient. These parts here are as well. The edge of the wing here is too. Here it has been restored. The high parts of the wing, where it is more yellow, were restored. Here we see up close the ancient glass, that of Viollet-le-Duc, or the windows from the former restoration. Notre-Dame de Paris is thus a real voyage in time for those who know how to decipher its marks. Now we're in the oldest part of the cathedral, where the construction began in 1163. The choir, as we see it today, shows traces of the cathedral's long history. The group of the Pietà, as well as the 6 statues of the angels holding the instruments of the Passion, are part of the remains of what we called the decor of the coronation of Louis XIII. In an act of February 10, 1638, Louis XIII dedicated his crown, his being, his kingdom to God through the intermediary of the Virgin Mary. The decor of Louis XIII's coronation is extended by the exceptional stalls and the sumptuous dossarets that are here. The whole was made in the beginning from the 1700s until 1727. And here we see the mark of Viollet-le-Duc in the decoration above the screen that surrounds the choir, the candelabra shield, the balustrade, all from Viollet-le-Duc's time. You must imagine that for centuries the choir was an enclosed area making 2 distinct spaces inside the cathedral. The space for the congregation, which was at the nave with its side chapels, the ambulatories around the choir with its radial chapels. This was where the congregation was. The space for the clerics, those of the church, was at the choir, which was completely isolated from the rest by walls or gates. There still remain 2 parts of these walls, known as the southern ambulatory and the northern ambulatory of the choir. They have remained intact because they served as support for the dossarets of the stalls that we see here today.
We are now before the enclosure of the choir, the only remaining element of the choir's isolation from the Middle Ages. This enclosure dates from the end of the 12th and primarily the 13th century. It shows the entire life of Christ. The first episodes of Christ's life are on the northern side. On the southern side are the episodes from Christ resurrected. We see him in various scenes showing his wounds to Mary Magdalene and the women saints. This stone screen has been painted white in the 18th century, for it was a period when polychrome sculptures had fallen out of grace. Once again, it was Viollet-le-Duc who had them repainted in the second half of the 19th century, trying to restore the polychromatic aspect that it had had in the medieval times.
We can imagine all the types of great celebrations that were held within the enclosed choir, such as the coronation of Napoleon I by Pope Pius VII that took place in the choir, in a different decor, certainly.
On pourrait évoquer, bien sûr, à Notre-Dame de Paris, parce qu'elle y a fait à l'époque.
We can also imagine, a few centuries earlier, a stopping place of King Saint Louis, without his royal robes, coming here to carry his newly acquired Christ's crown of thorns.
porter la couronne d'épines du Christ qu'il vient d'acquérir.
He would put it at the high altar of Notre-Dame
sur le maître-autel de Notre-Dame
before it would be
avant
carried
qu'elle
to
ne soit
Sainte-Chapelle from his
transportée
royal
à la
palace of the Ile de la Cité,
palais
what is now
royal
the
de la
Palais of
Cité,
Justice.
Aujourd'hui l'actuel palais de justice. Et par les
And by
hasards
history's strange
de l'histoire,
twists,
ou par la
or perhaps by
providence,
providence,
si
the crown
on
of
veut
thorns that was not
éviter le
intended for
hasard,
Notre-Dame
eh bien,
would
la
return
couronne
there
d'épines
thanks to
qui
Napoleon
n'était pas
Bonaparte.
destinée à Notre-Dame y est revenue par la volonté de Napoléon Bonaparte.
The main pieces shown in the treasure of Notre-Dame are the relics of Saint Louis, King of France. His clothes, a fragment of his jaw, and one of his ribs. The treasure contains the reliquary of the Holy Crown of Thorns and a fragment of Christ's cross, as well as a nail from the ladder. During the Renaissance, artists considered Gothic art as the work of barbarians, and thus hastened to hide pillars, to cover walls and arcades with huge tapestries, paintings, and statues. The Baroque statuary invaded the naves that were already filled with many altars and tombs.
This Virgin and Child, dating from the middle of the 14th century, does not come from Notre-Dame's cathedral. It had once been in Saint Agnon's chapel, who belonged to the cloisters of the chapter. During the French Revolution, the ensemble was dismantled, and in 1818, the sculpture was placed on the facade of the cathedral, servants of the Trumeau at the portal of the Virgin on its right side. Viollet-le-Duc decided to remove it when he had the works done on the cathedral, because it did not go with the rest of the portal from the 12th and primarily 13th centuries. So he had it brought into the cathedral and had another sculpture made to harmonise with the rest of the tympanum at the exterior of the cathedral. The cathedral holds a number of very large paintings commissioned by the Parisian metalsmiths between 1607 and 1707. Each year, a work was commissioned to thank the great painters that belonged to the Academy, such as Laher, Lebrun, Poussin, Blanchard, among others. These paintings were hung year by year in the cathedral, from the arcades to the nave to the choir. As there are about 75 works, you can imagine them filling the entire cathedral. No one was removed to make room for the next years. They all remained hung right to the end. In 1707, the metalsmiths decided to stop this practice because it became too costly, and the custom stopped there and then.
To commemorate the 850 years of the cathedral, the council decided to replace the old used bells, mismatched since the French Revolution, and to recreate the original sounds. In 1769, the cathedral had 8 bells in the north tower, 2 tenor bells in the southern tower, and 7 bells in the spire. The new pieces were cast in France at Villedieu-les-Poêles. The second tenor bell was made in Holland. They were blessed on February 2nd, 2013. Before they were put in place, an expert made sure the work was well done. It is curious that this acute sound can be found inside.
Entendez? Bon. Alors voilà, donc une cloche est un instrument de musique. On pense
One
que
thinks that
les
bells
cloches,
are
c'est
objects
simplement
that
des
just go ding dong ding,
qui font ding ding dong. Pas du tout.
while they are
Ce sont des
truly
instruments
musical
déjà
instruments.
qui ont l'hommage de l'Église, puisque vous savez qu'ils sont.
These are
ils
instruments
reçoivent
that are
l'onction
blessed
de
by the
l'Église,
church and even receive a
sont
name.
bénies, elles reçoivent un nom ou un prénom.
These objects are both musical instruments and part of the religion
Et,
at the same
en
time,
même temps, ce sont des instruments de musique,
in
un
the
peu
same
comme
way
dans
as
les
the organ,
églises.
on the
Vous avez
outside.
l'orgue à l'intérieur et les cloches pour le son extérieur.
Despite their enormous weight that can range from 7.5 tons to almost the double for the tenor bell Emmanuel, the clapper alone weighing almost half a ton, tuning requires great precision. The three bells on the spire of the cathedral ring the notes G, B, and D. In the southern tower, ringing an F sharp, is the ancient tenor bell, still in place and considered one of Europe's most beautiful. It is only rung on rare occasions, at Christmas, Easter, and upon the Pope's death. Beyond the new bells acquired for the 850th Jubilee anniversary of the cathedral, great works were undertaken to welcome in the 21st century. The great organ had its console entirely computerized, and then its 12,000 pipes were cleaned.
Eh bien, l'orgue de Notre-Dame est ici depuis le début du
Notre-Dame's organ has been here since the beginning of the 15th century, dating from 1403. Still today, in Notre-Dame's organ, we can see elements of the framework and some pipes from the Gothic era. It had been installed just after the construction of the cathedral. As with many instruments of cathedrals, including those of Notre-Dame, every 20 or 30 years, the organ is restored, improved, and expanded. Today, of the 8,000 pipes on this organ, a good third date from the 17th and 18th and better part of the early 19th centuries, and there are also additional, more recent parts. All forms one whole. That whole is the resounding structure that is not only to make music, but to make the stones of the cathedral sing. Here we have the organ's console, where there are these various buttons, levers, etc. All of this on each side is known as the ranks, meaning the instruments of music. To each of these ranks, there is a row of pipes, from the lowest to the smallest, the highest pitched. There are 56 of them in 56 keys. Multiplied by the number of ranks that you have here, each of these corresponds to a tone and an instrument. For example, you have here the base of the organ. You have a tone that is wide, the seat of the instrument. Added to that, the different shaped, different sized pipes, fat, tall, wide. When you put all these pipes together, they make the tones that are the base of the organ. It is what is known as a full chorus. Full does not mean total, but it's a type of full tone that was traditional in the 18th century and still is today. The great pipes of Notre-Dame de Paris had 86 stops in the 19th century. Today, after numerous restorations, there are 110 stops. The great organ, with song, is the motor of religious and cultural life of the cathedral.
l'histoire de la musique à Notre-Dame de Paris est très riche.
The history of music at Notre-Dame de Paris is very rich. Each era brought new repertoire. There are even composers who worked exclusively for Notre-Dame. Still today, this history continues to move, and the music at Notre-Dame is alive. Since 1991-92, it is the structure Sacred Music of Notre-Dame de Paris that has been given the musical responsibility by the state, by the city of Paris, and of course by the Diocese of Paris, the Cathedral of Notre-Dame, and the whole of the musical activities of the cathedral. There are three main missions. The first objective is pedagogical, meaning that young singers come to learn to sing within this structure, this sort of specialized conservatory for voice and sacred music. All the musicians who are trained here will go on to perform liturgical music. The second objective covers all musical activities with liturgical music and concerts. The third objective is to promote music in the cultural domain. The nave's lighting was also heavily restored, allowing for the creation of atmospheres that are appropriate for visits, masses, and evening concerts. These concerts are considered spiritual, as they present a repertory of sacred music from all eras. It is one of our aims from Gregorian chants to contemporary creation, passing through the great era of Renaissance polyphonic music, as well as Baroque creations. We cannot skip over Johann Sebastian Bach, for example, and other great composers. And of course, there are the great formats like the great masses of the 19th and 20th centuries. Notre-Dame is not a monument stuck in the past like a museum. It is a living cathedral. Research units are opening to promote coherence and pertinence of creations for both liturgical and artistic works. At Notre-Dame de Paris, faith is still alive, attracting almost 20 million pilgrims and visitors each year, of whom 14 million enter the cathedral. That makes an average of 30,000 people per day. On a busy day, there are over 50,000 pilgrims and visitors going through the doors. In France, it is the most visited site before Sacré-Cœur and Montmartre, the Louvre, Versailles, and even the Eiffel Tower. Its spire stands 96 meters high. The cathedral's construction spread over almost 2 centuries, and its style is thus not entirely uniform. It has both primitive Gothic and radial traits, and this adds to its appeal. It was, upon its completion, one of the greatest cathedrals of the West and throughout history.